Hello and welcome to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. I just felt good to say that today, Kev.
Holly showed me a video the other day of little man
Matthew
Jr. Doing it, and that's so funny, man. Great idea.
My little boy.
We got to get him in here.
Gosh, I got a story about my son that is a fantastic segue in today's episode. But before we dive into that, this is Kevin Adams, my good friend and brother. I'm Matt Ham. We are the co-founders of YouPrint, a faith and personal development organization, coming to you live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, here in the home of the Big Talker. This is Nick Craig in studio today, helping us out and get produced. We appreciate you, Nick. So, Kev, I want to thank our corporate partners for making this show possible. One of those being Melissa Thomas. This is Melissa the Coach, actually, is what she goes by. Melissa the Coach. MelissaTheCoach.com is where you can find her online. She is a speaker and a personal finance coach who helps people live intentionally by teaching them how to manage money the way God intended. Of course, she was a guest in our Faith in Business a couple weeks back. We're grateful for Melissa. You can email her, melissathecoach@gmail.com, or give her a call, 910-338-9612. Having a good day today, man. I know your wife's out of town, and so I'm checking in on you, man. You doing good?
Oh, yeah. Doing great, man. But I do miss my bride. I think I love my wife more every week. I'll say every day, but I don't know if that's true.
We appreciate honesty. Right?
Every week, though, man, it grows.
It's good every week. Yeah,
she's just such a great lady, and just deeply in love with her. But I miss her because we laugh. And yes, so thanks for bringing it up. I don't want to get too emotional, but yeah, man, she's gonna be gone for a week. She's in Nashville visiting her best buddy and some other folks. So.
Well, good, man.
I'm glad for her, but yes, thanks.
It's necessary to hang with friends. It's necessary to laugh and, all the above. Yeah. So that is good. That is good. So, man, it's funny you brought up Matthew Jr., my son, and this is my mini-me. Of course, he carries my name. But last night, and for those who don't know Matthew, for those who don't know my son is, I just love him so much, and he's just such a gift from the Lord. But he's so inquisitive, man. I mean, he will ask you 700 questions, and deep questions too, man.
It's great.
And he's so pensive. He thinks about things deeply, and it's challenging as a dad because I'm like, man, can we just hey, we need to let's just sit here for a minute, I don't have to answer all these questions. Mm-hmm. Well, last night, he didn't want to really go to bed, and we were in bed with, Liz and I were kind of getting ready for bed, and he was like, Dad, will you come upstairs and pray with me? And of course, my son asks me that. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to pray with him.
Yeah.
So I sit on the edge of the bed, and Matthew kind of looks at me. And I'm kind of getting tired at this point. I'm almost to that edge of being a little bit, but he's like, Dad, how do you hear from God? And I'm like, wow. What time is it? Kind of a huge question. Yeah. But he said something to me that it melted my heart because, we've been talking about me lately struggling to understand and discern God's voice.
Sure.
And he said, Dad, it just feels sometimes like God's your best friend because you always talk to him and you'll come down and say, hey, God showed me something today, or I learned this from God. He's like, Matt, he said, Dad, I have not heard from God. I don't feel like I have. And so, man, I share that to say that's something my son asked me, and I think it's a question that a lot of people ask.
Yeah, it is.
And as it relates to spiritual development, with what we're talking about lately, getting past go, I just thought it was a great question to kick off the show, and it's just apropos.
Sure.
That's what we've been walking through.
Well, it's kind of like if you get a white car, then you see a bunch of them. I
right?
think it works that way. Basically, our awareness. It expands, and I call it God kind of expands our periphery, and it's great. But you still need eyes in the back of your head sometimes to get it. That's why we walk together. That's why there's a family of God, and that's why people have different gifts and all that kind of stuff. And when people are made whole or made into the image of Jesus, they go from being sanctified or servant-mindedness to sanctified sons. So the sanctification process is learning. One of the big key components there is learning, not just believing that Jesus is your Savior. That's go, right? We talked about this last week, but it's learning who He is innately in taking on His personality as a son or daughter, and so it is. It's incumbent. I mean, it's absolutely necessary for us to understand that we hear His voice. So this is a huge part of it. And for a kiddo to get it, in fact, it's funny because kids hear it, I think, all the time. They just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's probably where Matthew is, his childlike heart. But we have to learn that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we're talking about today. We're kind of going back a little bit to last week just to say getting past go. So this week we're going to talk about discerning the voice of God. Not only in us, but with other people.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we see people saying this stuff, and we don't really know what to make out of it. So we need to talk through that.
Well, it's important because, I mean, in the name of God, in the name of Jesus, there's been a ton of evil done, a ton of terrible stuff.
Right.
And that is one of those things the enemy uses to give God and Jesus a black eye. And so we, as brothers and sisters, we have to learn how to discern this process.
Yeah, right.
And, of course, discerning of spirits is a gift and so forth, and we can kind of dive in from whatever angle. But I think the key thing for me to start off with is, like you said, getting past go. But I just want to encourage our listeners, I think people get wonky a little bit when you start talking about hearing from the Lord and kind of, talking to God or whatnot. And I think that the first step is a willingness. I think the first step has to be a willing heart to say that if He is my Heavenly Father, He speaks, and I want Him to speak to me, and I long for that. Yeah. I think an openness and an asking. This morning I was reading in Luke, and it says, seek and you'll find, ask and you shall receive, knock and it will be opened. Mm-hmm. That's a command, as the way I see it, and it's a promise.
Right.
So we have to hold on to that promise. Mm-hmm. This is mine.
It is.
And I think it's a beautiful thing. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents, starting with a willing heart.
Yeah. Well, yes, there's a lot here, so we'll try to keep it systematic, and I have to kind of angle to see the clock, so keep me on track.
Yeah.
But willingness, what is willingness? And that's, so let's talk about that a second. Willingness is actually letting go of your own will. Because you're submitting to God's will. And until you do that, when you're truly His, He will make your will a wilderness. And it will become that way until you are ready to surrender it. It's kind of like laying down in the desert because you can't go on anymore. And as soon as you lay down and let go of it, God shows you the palm trees and the and the water, and it's like that's all He wants, right? So willingness is the key. Now, from a mechanical standpoint, I just wanted to kind of back up again. I'm kind of sensitive on time.
A couple minutes here,
because there's a lot. This is a huge question, but here's one thing, especially when it comes to us, and that is anything that comes from God is going to bear fruit. Okay, so the fruits of the Spirit are a very important template for us to begin to understand this. Now, we're going to get into this in a little while when it comes to other people, how we can identify if God is actually speaking to someone, and we'll talk about the ups and downs of it. But for us, we have to remember that we've got 3 sort of boxes. Mechanically speaking, we've got the mind, and we're separating them a little differently today. We've got the mind, which is the will and the logic. We've got the heart, which is part of the soul, but the heart is kind of in the middle in this process. Think about it as the mind or the will, and then think about it as the heart, and then underneath, think about the third box, if you will, as our spirit man, and that is the dwelling place of God. So when we come back, we'll talk about how that works together, and we talk about the spiritual chiropractic adjustment and how to get those things in order so you can know confidently you're hearing from God.
Yeah. I think a beautiful thing as we go into break here is just to remember that the Lord is not about confusion.
That's right.
And so if you feel confused, if you feel conflicted, that's not His will. It is His peace, right? And so just be encouraged that He's trying to work this out to unconfuse the situation. So It's a huge topic today, Kev. We got a lot to unpack here. I'm excited to do that. Guys, you are listening to and watching Wake Up Our Faith. We always want to encourage you to check out the Portable Faith Community. This is one of the ways that we begin walking with people. This is how we kind of navigate stepping into what spiritual development looks like. And you can get plugged in at wakeupmyfaith.com. Check that out during the break. We'll be back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. As always, Matt Ham, Kevin Adams here with you. Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 FM. Thanks for tuning in. We are grateful to our corporate partners for making this show possible. One of those being Freeman Landscaping, North Carolina's largest privately owned land and irrigation firm, or I should say Eastern North Carolina's largest privately owned land and irrigation firm. Make sure you give them a call for either commercial or residential landscaping irrigation needs, 910-796-1166. So Kev, we are diving into a giant bag of goodies today. Mm-hmm. How do you hear from the Lord and lead by the Spirit? So before we broke, you were talking about the three segregated parts, the mind, the heart, and the spirit. and how they're all kind of wrestling, if you will, for the loudest voice in our lives. And so let's help people unpack this.
Yeah, well, really, in a just to kind of back up a little bit, you've got a bigger picture here. You got a spirit man. This is a dwelling place of God. This is where He speaks. It's not a translation device. It's not something. It's not a filter. It's just I think of it as an echo chamber. It's just a box, if you will, and it's like a box with an antenna on it. And when that thing is opened up and you're really allowing God to speak, you can pick up all kind of stuff that He's saying. Now, that's a weird way to say it. We can do the these and the thous and all that. So we're just using a little different language, but that's what it is. We call it the gut, the conscience, whatever. But God's voice lives there. We know that He dwells in our spirit. He says, I'll never leave you or forsake you. This is where that is. It's in us, So then we have the soul, and the soul is the mind, will, and emotion. So, and then you've got your body. All right, so we're breaking that down a little further to focus on His voice. All right, so that doesn't dismiss this. That's the bigger thing. But what we're talking about now is the mind, as far as the logic and the willpower and the self-preservation mechanism. So when you are walking by your own will, you are walking by sight. What you see determines what you do, and it can determine how you feel. So we've got to separate those out. So I'm just trying to lay that out. But you've got your will, then you've got your heart. The heart is the seat of the emotions, creativity, your genius. All of this kind of comes from that place, and but it's not a translation device either. It's more of it's kind of like the Irish guy in Braveheart. It's the guy who's willing to jump in no matter what, and then but it's going to follow the loudest voice. So you've got those three things. You've got spirit, where God speaks. You've got your heart, this incredible sort of engine to help you feel everything, and then you've got your mind. So think of it as three boxes, and then ultimately what we've got to learn how to do. So this is kind of getting back to the sort of recipe of it. It's a lot, so it's hard to cram it in, but you've got to learn how to quiet the mind, and this is what walking by faith is. Quiet the mind, and then the heart will follow the loudest voice, which is the spirit. So when you learn how to quiet the mind, which comes from studying the Word, then that stuff begins to get quiet. Your heart is just looking for a place to follow and run after. So if you don't do that, what happens is you begin to walk by sight. And that's when what you see goes into your heart. You let it in. Oh, well, what if this? What if that happens? Oh, no, this happened. Oh, no, someone has this. Oh, no. And when you allow yourself to feel that in your heart, that will become your reality, and you're going to believe what you see instead of what God says. Conversely, when you learn how to quiet the mind, you can separate these things by studying. It gives you peace. Then that voice never makes it into your heart. You may see things. Oh, no, this happens. Oh, no, I can't pay that bill. Oh, no, this person got fired. Whatever that is, you don't listen to this. You see it, you acknowledge it, but you don't let it into your heart. And then your heart will jump all over what God's saying in your spirit. And you'll hear it, and you'll see that stuff happen. It's powerful. That's the nutshell.
Yeah. Okay. A way that I've heard this before too, Kev, and let me know, I want you to weigh in on this, is think about a radio, right? We're on the radio. Radio waves are going through a room at any given time. And so the radio has to be tuned, to the channel in order to be able to receive that frequency or whatever, AM, FM, all that kind of stuff. So how do you begin? I'm thinking about this in our heart and the relatable point, and how do you see it in that kind of analogy of getting the tuner right, kind of tuning the spirit man into the frequency that God's kind of putting into the room?
Well, I think whatever helps people picture it is good. I think the Spirit itself is it's not something that it's not a translation device.
Yeah.
We're not meant to we just pick it up. It just picks up what God's saying. So yeah, in that sense, that is that way. I mean, our spirit is basically who we truly are, but God inhabits that. So what happens is He gives us stuff all the time, and we can't hear it. So in that way, yeah, absolutely, it's like picking up on what's going down. And He's never silent by accident.
Mm.
Typically, when He's silent, He's teaching us to chase Him, to go. It's like hide and seek.
Yeah.
But yeah. But you got to understand these components. It's not just about tuning a dial and picking up something. He's always speaking in different ways, but it's about connecting the heart with the Spirit instead of letting the heart
be led around,
follow the will and the mind.
Yeah.
Because if it does, then you end up confused or anxious and unfaithful, and that is walking by sight. God says, do not do that. He also says, lean not upon your own understanding. So all this stuff points to this same thing.
The same thing. So what do you see in this whole process? Because, I mean, like I said, there's no doubt that this is a big topic. And it's one that takes a lot of time, a lot of experience to navigate. It's not something you're going to pick up tomorrow, but it is essential in the Christian life to press to this place because this is where life is found.
Well,
and
depends on where you are, where you pick it up tomorrow or not. I mean, I think jump in. Go ahead. I don't mean to. I'm
just saying, what's the biggest obstacle in your experience? Because that's the reality if somebody has an obstacle. So I guess kind of starting to define what those obstacles look like, so folks can go, okay, well, this is something I'm interested in. What are the obstacles that are going to keep me from living this way?
Well, the biggest obstacle is not being in the Word. If you go to Hebrews, it talks about the Word is sharper than any two-edged sword and more powerful, and it separates soul and spirit, and it compares it to bone and marrow. They're very closely aligned, but they're different. You have to separate the spirit. The Word does that. It teaches you the difference between these two things we're talking about. So the Word is, when you study, and people always say, I don't have time, or it's confusing or whatever. But if you jump in with an affectionate heart, go after God's personality. It's not about memorizing it or trying to do it in a year, any of that stuff. That's all fine and dandy, but it's about going after God. So this is your foundational piece. So you don't study it to just learn what's in there. You study it to understand God's personality, to get to know Him. And what He does is He separates that out and He speaks to your spirit about the things you've read, and it wakens that up. It edifies it. When we start listening to our mind, what happens is we sear and quench the spirit. That's why when you see things, you don't have to believe what you see, unless you just want to, and then that's fine. But it's just contradictory to faith in general. So
yeah. It's funny. We've been navigating this with the kids lately. They at church or whatever, they encourage them to memorize verses, and so the boys being competitive, they're going through that process, and so it's affectionate. You want to hide the Word in your heart and memorize it. Yeah. But what Liz and I are trying to do is slow them down so that they understand that, hey, here's actually what this is about. Right. And it's taking it to that feeling level. Yeah. And that's important. Absolutely. And of course that's what, we help folks do, and we have this great resource in learning to feel the Word for those who are interested in kind of diving into that. But I think that the point is it begins with the stillness, diving into the Word and letting that begin to speak, because it is living and active. Yeah. That's right. And we cannot run away from it.
So you got to I don't know how much time we got again.
30 seconds.
So you got to remember the positioning, the mechanics of this. There are mechanics, and then you've got to begin by getting in the Word. Yeah. And it's that simple. Yeah. So we'll come back and finish up.
Yeah, it's a great thing, guys, breaking this down today. Appreciate you jumping on and joining us. Matt Ham and Kevin Adams, Wake Up Our Faith. We're going to take a short break. Be back for more right after this. back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you every single week. Appreciate you guys tuning in and supporting what we're doing here. We appreciate our corporate partners supporting the show as well. One of those being Century 21 Swalyer and Associates. This is our exclusive real estate partner, the Carolina's largest Century 21 Swalyer agency. If you're in the market for a new home or looking to get a quote on what your home might go for, what the market looks like, feel free to give them a call. More than 30 years experience here in southeastern North Carolina. 910-256-0021 is their number. Kev, we're unpacking a really cool idea today, and that is how do we begin to hear from God, how to begin to understand, discern His voice, live from the Spirit, and navigate by faith, not by sight. So let's carry on.
Yeah. Well, so we want to switch gears here, but before we do, because there's two things. I mean, this could be 5 shows, but this is about discerning. This is about getting past go. Just standing there going, "Jesus saves," and "Thank you, Lord." That's great, but there's more. So we want to get past go and become a son or daughter and see things the way God does. We have to, in order to do that, we have to discern His voice. Not only in us, but we have to be able to understand it in others. So a lot of people will throw stuff at us and put stuff on us. So we're going to get to others here in a minute. Before we do that, we'll just kind of recap. Remember, you have a spirit, and that's where God's voice lives. And all you have to do is listen. But in order to do that, you have to learn how to quiet your own mind. So this is what we call, in our teaching, spiritual instincts, or becoming spiritually instinctive. When you do that, you will become productive and you will bear good fruit. But ultimately, you have to learn how to listen. And when you start hearing that, because these things they're just powerful. But when the mind doesn't contradict it, the heart will follow, and the heart will apply that emotion. There's an old saying, I don't know if it's Maya Angelou or somebody, but they said people don't remember really what you say. They remember how you make them feel.
That is Maya Angelou, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the reason for that is because whatever you attach your heart to, that's what your belief system will become, and that will become your reality. So there's a lot of truth. So you want all that to be attached to what God's saying, not only in the written word, but in the implanted word in your spirit.
Yeah.
So that's the process of how to hear His voice. It takes practice. The other thing is it takes courage, and we'll get into that in the business section, but you have to learn how to follow it when He starts talking to you. Well, He's always talking, but when you start picking up on it, you have to follow it. That takes courage. When you do it, though, you'll see confirmation. That's how you know it's Him.
Yeah, and you begin to learn from it. That's the process of maturation. It's small steps, and then it builds, and then it's bigger steps, and then it's bigger steps. It doesn't begin with some crazy. We talk about it like this: as faith is a muscle, that is strengthened as it's tested, or as it's as it's pressed into, as it grows, and and that's the challenging part. Something you mentioned a minute ago, Kevin, and this is kind of my challenge, is your heart tends to follow the loudest voice, right?
Always does.
And so when the voices around you, now listen, this could be a boss, it could be a spouse, it could be a mentor, a friend, or whatever, you know what I mean? When you start to attach to people and you give them this positional place in your life, you for me at least, this is where I you so desperately love, I love people, you want to please them, and those voices.
I think we do,
right? Yeah, I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah.
I know you do.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, you want that becomes the navigational thing up here, for me at least.
Yeah, and
it's the voices of people, and that's the muddy water,
right?
And so, I understand. How do you begin to quiet that? Like, do you have a practice? Do you have something you consistently do, or something you've learned to do, to kind of detach from that?
Yeah. Well, I guess you have to define what loving people is. Loving people, first and foremost, is being able to walk in truth with them. It's not. I don't believe it's not. You want to listen to people, but you don't have to receive the junk. And this is from a teaching place. But loving people doesn't necessarily mean just patting them on the back. It means walking in truth. So I think in order to go from one place to another, you have to be able to say, what is truth and where does it come from? Well, as Christians, we believe it comes from the Word of God.
Yeah.
And we also know that God speaks to us through our spirit, and that is truth. But you have to be able to understand it and be confident in that and walk in it. And when you do, you'll see Him confirm it. Now, I've been at this a long time, and I'm not saying it out of some weird arrogance or anything. I just seen it happen over and over and over again to the point where I know it's Him, and I know when it's not Him, and it's always the same process. So take it or leave it, but this is how it works. And Scripture backs this up. So, in other words, ultimately, you want to develop and edify your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that by staying in the Word with a right heart mentality, and you also quiet the mind. You let God, Jesus says this over and over, cast your cares, his burden is light, his yoke is easy. Over and over, do not worry about tomorrow. Today has enough trouble of its own. Consider the lilies. Over and over, he's saying this. So we either believe it or we don't. And if we do, it's not about being nice. It's about being honest and going. Otherwise, you'll waste your life. So that said, work on this. Remember your spirit. Now, I tend to point to the abdomen because it gives it place. I don't know, the depths of it is almost irrelevant. But what we have to do is give it place so that we can logically think about this when we're participating. But God will speak to you here. Your heart needs to follow that. In your mind, where you take in through your senses, you have to be really careful with that, not let it get into your heart. You can acknowledge it. So that's the process. Getting it flipped. The more you practice, the better it will become, and you'll know that's God speaking to me. I know that. And the funny thing is a lot of times, almost always, it's illogical. It's like, hey, march around the walls of Jericho and they're going to fall. Every breakthrough in Scripture is like that. So there's our word foundation for that. But let's switch gears now.
Okay.
So this is how you hear from God, how we hear from God. But it's also we get around other people. And this is where it gets really weird and kind of goofy. People will tell you, I'm hearing from God, and we owe them the love and the kindness to hear them out if we're in that circle. It doesn't mean they need to get to project something on us. That's right. There's a red flag when someone immediately comes to you and says, "I have something that you need to listen to for you." Now, it could be true, because God does speak through prophetic moments in people, and it's a gift. But that doesn't mean that everything that
sorry about that
comes out of there is good. And in fact, a lot of it isn't. So let's talk about what that looks like when we're hearing people proclaim big things or little things from God, and how do we walk through that? So that's sort of, I don't know, how much time do we got in this
segment here? We got a minute and a half.
Okay, so we'll kind of go through that in the next segment, but let's touch on it here.
Yeah, it's interesting because this says something that I did not grow up in this in general, right? Because I think in the Christian paradigm, there are those who lean more this way, and then there's those that don't. Meaning denominationally, however you want to couch that. I'm just saying This is something that I've stepped into recently. And when you step into it, you begin to see it more. It's like you said, if you're driving a white car, you tend to see other white cars.
Right.
And so, it is something I think that has been a learning process of quieting this thing and beginning to understand it. And what it's caused me to do, which has been beautiful, is it's caused me to run after God. It's caused me to draw closer to him, because it's saying, I just want to be so close with you, Lord. I just want to be right there, trusting that you're going to guide this thing. And what you find is that he does confirm this, in your spirit and in other ways that bring about his goodness. And so that's just an encouragement to those stepping into this, is that, from my experience, this is something you can trust, because God will come alongside and he will show you how much he loves you, because he desires clarity in our spirit for us. If we desire it, he won't impose it on us.
That's right.
But he'll draw us to it.
Yeah. Not sure how much time we got left. So.
Yeah, we've got just a few seconds. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything. We got like 20. We'll catch it in next segment.
Next segment.
All right, sounds good. Guys, you are listening to and watching Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham and Kevin Adams. We always want to encourage you to check out the Portable Faith Community. This is how we walk with folks. It's a way to get plugged in. It's a way to actually support our ministry. It's a way to support the show. It's a way to help us pour into the lives of others that don't have the resources to do that. We would encourage you to check it out, wakeupmyfaith.com. We'll be back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith, the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you as always. Thank you guys for tuning in and letting us know what you think about the show. I mean, we love hearing back from our listeners. We love folks that jump on social media or send us emails, whatever the case may be. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. It's uprint.life on the web. We're grateful for you guys. Our corporate partners make this show possible, one of those being Dr. Greg Veman of Seacoast Skin Surgery. Fantastic team. Dr. Veman also has a great ministry, Everlasting Strength. You can connect with them. I think it's everlastingstrength.org, and you can connect with them via phone at 910-256-2100. So, Kev, today we're talking about how to begin to hear from the Lord, be led by the Spirit, and now we've moved into how to distinguish and understand that in relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, discerning the voice of God in us and in others. And our job isn't to just walk around and figure out if people are hearing from God or not. We need to do that for ourselves. Excuse me. But when people step into our life and they maybe God is leading something, and absolutely, especially I know when it comes to us, you and me, and our wives, and what we're doing, God speaks through each of us all the time, and it works beautifully together. He always confirms it, and even some other folks that God's put around us. It's incredible how it works. So we don't need to say, make blanket statements and say, well, I'm suspicious of everybody either. But we have to use good stewardship in this. But the thing is it's not hard. It's not some puzzle we have to figure out. Sometimes it takes a while, but it's just a due diligence, and it's very important that we grab hold of this, but not be afraid of it or feel like we're putting anything on anybody.
Sure.
So there's the big caveat. All right. So first thing is we have to recognize the fruits of the Spirit. There's 9 listed in Galatians, and those are love, joy, peace, patience or long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So that right there, because you can't be in someone else's spirit, you can't be inside of that person or in their heart, you don't really know. So you have to let what comes out be filtered through something. Rather than just because it's not logical or it sounds weird doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah.
In fact, that might even mean it's right.
Yes.
So but we've got to look at it through and by the template of the fruits, because if the Spirit has fruit, God tells us to judge by the fruit. So we have to make our decisions based on what we see from a spiritual place. So you can get to where you can feel it, but the very first thing when you encounter this is you double check the fruits of the Spirit. So we can walk through those, but that's the general basis.
Yeah. Kevin, when you wrote your book originally, I know you gained, it was published by Zondervan, so you gained national attention, and you people started to reach out to you, started to have conversations with all different types of folks, and this is something you walked through in that
Sure.
time.
Yeah. You mean
just people with opinions, people with things.
Yeah.
So
I understand.
Just trying to draw this into an actual scenario.
I got you. Yeah, no, I did, and it's funny. I've got emails, and this is funny thing is people look at my book and read that, and we've come light years since then. But effectively, that is a period of time from like 2009 to 12 that book reflects where I was in my growth. But up to that point, I did this. I mentored and worked with a lot of people, but people would reach out to me through Twitter. Had a huge following in that, and my blog and different areas. And so automatically, when people think you know something, whether you do or not, and not saying I did, but they would reach out. So sometimes people want to attach themselves to that, or they really are getting something. So what I learned is you have to really gain that discernment. Yes, there is a gift, discerning spirits. We're not talking about that. Mm-hmm. We're talking about being a Christian, being able to understand God's voice in others and be able to discern it for our lives. And we had once in a while someone would speak something incredible into us or over us, and God confirmed it. And he is continuing to confirm a few things from even 2009.
Yeah, I think it's this beautiful picture of, you hear the story of the guy on an island praying that God would send deliverance, and You know, he sees the plane and the boat and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
and he said, "Well, he'll deliver me." You know, and I think about with yourself, even knowing your story. I mean, you were reached out to by a fairly prominent writer, and they encouraged you and connected you. And I mean, there's multiple things that happened, but then you were on the flip side. There was other writer folks that had words and stuff that didn't manifest. And so, you know, I'm just trying to create context. Is this is something that you've had to walk through in multiple scenarios where it has been edifying and then it has not been edifying. And I think that's powerful to realize.
Yeah. Well. So I guess the point in that is it comes from experience, but you know, people are always going to, especially when you have some level of success, at least in worldly eyes, people are going to jump in and so that's a scenario. But you don't have to have that. You can be walking down the street, you can be in church, you can be in your office, whatever, and Christians will gladly give you their thoughts, and sometimes they feel like it's prophetic. So we have to be on guard, but not fearful.
Yeah.
So that's very important. And we have to be confident in that, and loving and kind and all that. But the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I'm trying to go fast because I know this is our last segment on this, and we can bleed over. But so what happens is anything that comes from the Spirit of God will carry these qualities. It will carry these things. And when you start seeing the counterfeit of that, you can know, wait a second, even though someone's speaking something that is true, possibly, or Scripture, there is something off on that. And we have experienced that individually and together, and it's very, very troubling, and it's hard to walk away from without it kind of beating on you. So this is spiritual warfare, but the easiest way is to learn the fruits of the Spirit, what they are. And so when you start seeing, so for instance, love, well, fearfulness, the counterfeit of that. So you got good fruit and bad fruit. The counterfeit of that is fearfulness or displaced. It's not. There's some other selfish agenda. Joy, lack of humor. Lack of goodwill, very stressed. Goodness, this is the counter. Sees only what God isn't doing. Anxiety, frustration, peace. You know, we can go on and on. Patience is what you see. Someone can talk about patience, but they're doing it in a rushed, anxious, do it now kind of way. It's very aggressive. Kindness, the opposite of that, or the counter of that is harshness. Faithfulness. What you see is unloyal or contradictory behavior, where someone will do this and then do that. It's back and forth. It's double-minded. And as gentleness, you see sort of forcefulness when there's a forceful feeling. Self-control, inability to contain oneself. So I had to get all that in, but think through that, back it up, and listen to it again. These are signs of bad fruit. When you start, so you can be saying Jesus saves all day, but doing it in a way that produces bad fruit. And what that is that's mixing truth with counterfeit. And that's exactly what the enemy does. We see it all through Scripture. He doesn't just lie. He mixes the two together. So we have to untangle them. And it's very cumbersome. It's heavy. It leaves you feeling heavy, depressed, and it keeps you awake at night if you let it. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very dangerous. But I think people, when they hear this, they'll go, oh, yeah, I can, it doesn't mean we're painting people as bad. It just means we got to look out for it.
There's an awareness that's required, to walk this out. And it says keep your lamps lit and you be awake,
right?
Be alert, and that's what we have to do.
That's right.
Because the gospel talks about, there's that which will be false, and when Paul writes, he says, "You Galatians, who bewitched you? Why are you running off down this path?" Mm-hmm. And this is that part that folks don't like to talk about. But if you don't talk about it and you're not aware of it, you can just be light years away. It's like those two lines, right? Mm-hmm. It's they're going in opposite directions.
God's will and our faith. If they're a tick off, then we'll go the opposite direction. But the sanctification is molding us into the express image of God's Son. Mm-hmm. That's what this is all about. So we don't have to be afraid of people. We have to be joyful, but aware.
Yeah. Good stuff, guys. Great first hour here on Wake Up Our Faith. We're going to be back with Faith in Business right after this. Hello, and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith in Business. This is a show dedicated to helping you live out your faith where you spend the majority of your time, and that is in business. This is about bridging that gap between Sundays. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you live here at Wilmington Big Talker 106.7 FM. Many thanks to Nick Craig in studio helping produce the show. We want to thank our corporate partners for making this show possible. One of those being Chris Hutchins and his team at Guaranteed Rate Mortgage. Chris was a guest last week. Enjoyed having him on the air to kind of give us an update on the mortgage market. If you're in the business for purchasing a home or refinancing, give Chris and the team a call there, 910-344-0304. So Kev, you know, I'm loving and we're getting feedback from folks that are really digging the faith in business concept, and you know, just the approach that we're taking of helping people understand practical ways on how to begin to infuse their faith into their business. And of course, it's not about preaching from your desk or throwing Bibles at people or, you know, just simply inviting them to church. That's not bad in context, but that's not it either. And so we got to press beyond that.
Yeah.
And what does it look like?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've got some great interviews already that you can check out on our YouTube page and a podcast as well. Cedric Harrison with Port City. Gosh, I can't think of the last name. He's got a great story, doing some really cool things here in Wilmington. But Support the Port, that's what it was. Will be with us next week. But this week we wanted to take some time and really begin to apply this idea of how do we begin to navigate by the Spirit? How do we begin to hear from God in our own lives in business and navigate others in a business sense? I think it's a really powerful concept.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I think people, first thing we have to do is we're trying to break off the perceptions of man so that we can have God's perspective. We want to be able to see it the way He does. And so when we become like Jesus, then we can operate that way. And He operated sometimes just covertly, sometimes it's never fearful, but it's always bold but kind, you know, firm, joyful. It's got this wonderful heavenly mix of just power, and you can feel it when you get around people who are incredibly faithful, or they walk in this humility. You can just feel it. You just know. So we want to kind of gather that up in a bowl and say, take this with you into your day job, into your office, into your environment of commerce.
Sure.
Because that's where you spend the most time. So one of those, we talk about innovation and being revolutionary and excellence. We talk about a lot of things in this environment because there's a lot to it, but it's all ground level. It's all practical. You can carry it out. This is a little bit higher up on the, you got to fly the helicopter up a little bit and look at it. But it's still very practical. So how do you carry out this thing where you know God's speaking to you and how to make decisions in business, which can be very difficult. A lot of dilemmas go on in business environment. You have to let someone go and that kind of thing. So then also, how do you navigate through those kind of things when other people that have authority in that environment over you, but maybe not a spiritual authority. So how do you reconcile those things? That's the context. I guess.
Well, it's a powerful conversation because business owners and business leaders have to make decisions constantly, and there's constantly so many things that are driving the decision-making process.
Right.
I remember when I was in the insurance business, there are requirements and validation schedules and production schedules and goals and all this different type of things that you have to abide by or at least put into play. And if you're not inviting God into that, then why bother? It's weird. And for years I didn't. It was like, well, this is just my work, and that's my faith over there. But the point is to if you're either inviting the power of God and the voice of God and the wisdom of God and the provision of God into your business, or you're not.
Right.
And so you choose.
Yeah.
And we are for those who want to choose, of course, to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're coming from with this.
Yeah.
Instead of following all these other voices, profit margins and, production schedules and all the constant demands that create all this noise.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's the easy thing to do is to say, well, this is business, so let's be different. So let's be more warrior-like in the world's way. Let's justify things, and really, you got to go back to the kind of cliched question now. Get your armband out from the '90s. It says, "What would Jesus do?" And would he say those kinds of things? Would he act on them? What he says is, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, pay your taxes. In other words, it's good. These are the kind of things where you can see that Jesus can walk right through that environment without compromising who he is and was.
Sure.
We don't need to do that either, because he is not only the personification of God, he is in us, and we have to take on his character, not just imitate his behavior. So we have to do that in business. So we don't need to say, rationalize harshly things like, sorry, guy, it's just business, nothing personal. Well, it's very personal because we're people. So unless you're a robot or a machine, it's always going to have a personal aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, how do you do this? What we're talking about again today is discerning God's voice.
Yeah.
So being able to listen to him in every situation. So in a business environment, what we kind of look for is wisdom. So where does wisdom come from?
Yeah.
So I'm tentative on the time and going on and on.
Yeah, no, you're fine. We got 3 minutes, I think. Yeah, 3 minutes before we got a break here. It's so where does wisdom come from? I mean, that's hypothetical. I'm going to answer you though. So wisdom comes from the fear of the Lord, and with humility. I mean, that's Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Mm-hmm. With humility comes wisdom. Right. So for us, the posture is humility and fear of the Lord. Mm-hmm. And if that's what drives wisdom, how are we applying that to our work environment? Mm-hmm. And are we?
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're taught culturally that worldly wisdom is the fear of everything but the Lord. And in fear of the Lord isn't fear. It's not true fear the way that God tells us not to be afraid of the world. He tells us to fear him, which means respect and love him as a father, which is an affectionate term. It's not, he's coming with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
So, but there are really two types of wisdom that are godly. One is proverbial wisdom. That's why Solomon was the wisest man that ever lived. And also Jesus was the wisest man that ever lived, because he had a heavenly mindset. We have both because we're in a new covenant. We're way past Pentecost. We get both. So we need to take both into. This is incredible. This is something we get to tap into. One type of wisdom where God will give it to you, and it's mostly through experience. He said, I'll give it to you freely without reproach. But that means he's going to give it to you typically. He gave it to Solomon like that because he asked for it. And I don't say he won't do that, but typically he carries us through experience.
Sure.
And grinds it into us. But what happens is we learn through that, and we hold tight to that. But these are things like, how does this work? How does that work? This is how people are, etc. So that's one type of wisdom, is very earthly. The other type is the mind of Christ. And we teach all this in the cleanse, by the way. You can get that. But the mind of Christ it's like the cloud. It's where God says, I'll give you the words, don't worry about it. He gives us wisdom in the moment. And it's so powerful, but we can't contain it. So these two put together, this is true wisdom. This is what you can take in any situation and walk right through it and understand what to do and how to react or how to be proactive and solve any problem. You literally can do that when it's God doing it for you.
Yeah. And Kevin, in your experience, where are business folks missing out in this realm?
Well, going back to our last segment or our last hour, same idea applies. Are you stuck in your mind? Are you walking by sight? See, a lot of people will, it's Sunday, so I'm going to walk by faith, but now it's Monday, so I'm going to walk by sight. And, you said it earlier, people tend to box everything in. So my faith is over here, my business is over here. Never two shall intertwine, and that's silly.
Yeah.
You know?
The first thing I think about, and we've got to take a break here in a second, is that a house divided cannot stand. And so a business divided won't stand
right.
either. And so if you're dividing your business mind and your faith mind, it won't stand. You know, it might be successful for a season, but it'll be dust really quickly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the question is are we living and applying something that'll matter 1,000 years from now?
Right.
Which is one of the great challenges that we want to step into, want to encourage you guys to step into.
Yes.
You know, what will matter about your life in 1,000 years? Well, you're either inviting the power of God and His wisdom into your work environment, which is where you're spending your time, or you're not.
Exactly.
And we certainly hope you are. I want to encourage you to do that. Matt Hammy, Kevin Adams, short break. Back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Faith in Business. This is the second hour of our show, Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams. We are the co-founders of Uprint. Our heart here and the purpose of this show is to help business owners, business leaders, people who are in business, wherever that might be, kind of invite God's presence and those practical ideas of how you begin to live out your faith in between Sundays. And we've got a great show going on today. Before we dive into some more powerful thoughts, want to recognize our corporate partners for making this show possible. One of those being Fountain Financial Associates and our good friend Chris Riley over there. They are in the business of giving clients and families a better life. They call it keeping promises. If you're looking for any financial advice and financial planning, make sure you call Chris Riley and the team at Fountain Financial, 910-256-8882. Kev, we're talking today about how we begin to let God speak in our lives and in our businesses, and kind of carrying that torch there as a primary marker. And I want to just, before we dive into more content, just let our listeners know, like, this is what we do from like a faith-based executive business coaching dynamic.
Yes.
We walk with business owners and business leaders who are hungry to begin to activate and live this out in their business.
Right.
And so just to let folks know, it's a great resource. If you're a business person, if you're a business-minded person, an entrepreneur, if you're navigating life and business and you are a Christian, you call yourself a person of faith, and you're wondering how to do that, that's what we specialize in. So I just want to make sure people know. You can go to our site, uprint.life, youprint.life, connect. We can set up a call, find out where you are, but I just want to make sure people were aware.
Yeah, and it comes from business success in the world, and not just some kind of theological, philosophical argument. It's both. So if you want both, you want it from experience, and just jump in. It's pretty, and we're just passionate about it. So absolutely, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so we're talking about this idea of discerning God's voice and being able to understand that in us, in business, and what does that look like? And we use the premise of wisdom. God gives us wisdom through experience, but that stuff kind of hangs around. It's not something we get and then it's gone. You get it. It's the red pill, right? You get it through experience. You ask for it. God gives you those experiences. Some people complain about it. Maybe we all do to some degree, but then we look at it as an opportunity to grow from, and then God gives us authority in that area, and we carry that into our business. So we don't have to be afraid of circumstances. The other thing, and the even greater thing, because Jesus was greater than Solomon, right? And we're talking about two different kinds of wisdom, is to have the mind of Christ. Now, this is where you can cut through any situation and know what to do. It seems crazy, but it's not. It's real. But if you don't believe that, then you're going to go back and stay up. And I had a guy the other day telling me, "Man, I'm stressed. I've got some heavy stuff going on. I'm in my sleep. I'm thinking about this, and maybe having to go through this huge decision in a corporate environment." And I said, "Look, man, you're not getting paid to work in your sleep, so stop." But how do you do that? So you have to have these things. You have to function in this. You have to walk with this as your preeminent navigation tool instead of all this other stuff.
Yeah. What happens, man, is when you begin living by that other stuff and you let that stuff creep into your heart, creep into your sleep, creep into your bedroom, that's what destroys your life, because it just robs you of joy. It robs you of time with your family. It robs you of intimacy with your spouse, significant other, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's seeking to take everything from you if you don't put it in its proper construct.
That's right.
And we we see this because we walk with people who is like, but I just got, no, at some point you have to couch the butts and say, I'm not going to let my life be lived this way anymore.
That's right.
I'm not going to let this type of thinking dominate my thoughts, and I'm not going to live in this weird, stressed environment. We wonder why cancer is so rampant. We wonder why mental health is so rampant. It all stems from the reality that we're bearing weight we weren't intended to carry in stress and fear. The enemy is taking it from us. We're letting him take it from us because we're not willing to live out this faith life between Sundays, which is where we spend the majority of our time.
That's right.
And so there's my little soapbox, not to dive into that, but it's just important for us to understand that there are grave implications on this that have everything to do with the well-being of your life.
Yeah, it's wholly good or wholly bad. It goes in the wrong direction and spirals down into every part of your life, including what you're presenting to your children, which is generational. So it goes on into the next generation. That's where you have generational strongholds, and that just goes on and on. So it is a big deal to get this. Even if you've come from that, then you want to. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Kind of weird. Even if you've come from the generational curse, you want to be able to take your stand and go no more. and my generations are going to be different. So it's just a huge thing. And tell me how much time we got real quick, just so I'll know.
We got 4 minutes.
Okay, good. And again, hopefully next time I won't have to do this, but so let's bring it down to earth. Practical example. I've owned multiple businesses, had a lot of success in that, and encountered just, you name it. I've encountered it from extortion to just everything in some fashion or another, temptations, all kinds of things. But I remember one guy in particular, I had hired him. He was he ran our accounting, inside accounting, and I had to learn the hard way. So that was the experience part. I gave him a signature stamp, and it wasn't long before he was running his own business on the side by buying equipment and everything from my bank account or my business bank account. And people don't know this. They just say, "Oh, there's Kevin. He's a surfer." But no, man. Look, I've had incredible success and been through just about anything you can think of. So without looking at it from some high-minded place, just listen to what I'm saying. This fella stole thousands of dollars from me, and it took a while to get through and understand what was going on. So, but God gave me wisdom, and through that I understood, and my wife and I began to understand what was going on. Now, the other side of wisdom, the mind of Christ, what do you do with it? How do you deal with it? And how we dealt with this guy. So the quick, easy thing is throw him in jail, and that's not what happened. So there's a lot here. But when you think about Jesus walking through the room and dealing with that situation, that's how you have to think. And even if you don't have the answers, God will give them to you. So that's a long story, and it turned out really well, and we were blessed. And this guy was blessed. We did let him go, but he was cheerful, and it was just an incredible thing to see God work through that kind of situation. But that's an example of where you need both kinds of wisdom, where you need to hear from God, the mind of Christ, but you need to experience Him daily so that you have that kind of wisdom too. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, the reality is we face these situations every single day in business, and having the ability to kind of process it from both places is key. And inviting God to kind of speak into that, and not just bringing like a flamethrower to the place and burning it all down, or whatever the case might be. It's just give God the space to kind of step into it and speak, and then faithfully follow it out. And if you do that, I mean, again, there's situations and circumstances, and in fact, I was just thinking about one today. Where I wanted to vindicate myself. I wanted to go, hey, this didn't happen, and it should have happened. And I need to make amends for that. I need to go in and ask the question of why this didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
And, you want to go, I want an answer. I want an answer. And even in processing through wanting that answer, I really felt like God just said, you do not need justification and answers from people. You're free.
Yeah.
You can choose to stress on this, or you can just let it go. And it goes back to this fruits of the Spirit thing. I mean, that was a situation, a circumstance that was just trying to rob me of joy.
Yeah.
And I could have played into it and continued to kind of let it fester, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna confront this, and I'm gonna do all that kind of stuff. And God's just saying, no, that's not what I have for you here. I've got something ahead of you that's great. You can continue to stay stuck in this and miss out on what I've done, and you can mature through it and step into what's ahead. So it's real, guys. I mean, I just want you guys to know that this is just not ethereal stuff. This is real blood and guts, things that are being lived out.
Yeah. So when we come back, we'll talk about discerning the voice of God in other people in our business. What does that look like? What do you need to stay away from? What's okay to take another step?
Yeah. Great stuff, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. This is Faith in Business, part of Wake Up Our Faith here on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 FM. Matt Ham and Kevin Adams take a short break. Be back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Faith in Business. This is the second hour of our show, Wake Up Our Faith, here on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 FM WFBT. Many thanks to Nick Craig in studio, helping us produce the show every week. And Kevin Adams here with me. I'm Matt Hand. We're the co-founders of UPrint, Faith and Personal Development Organization. Kevin, we were just talking in the break about an upcoming leadership event that we have. There's a Rotary group up in Onslow County who is putting on a leadership development retreat or workshop for high school juniors. And we have the opportunity to go up there and connect with them and kind of share some thoughts and ideas on leadership, some workshop stuff and whatnot. And so I just wanted to let our audience, our listening audience, know that this is the kind of stuff that we do.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, we're reaching all age groups, within that age of accountability on. I mean, because we want the generations ahead to get this and be able to operate in this, and especially in their business community as they develop into business future leaders. Yeah. So, and you're leading that, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's cool because, you've got these impressionable, high school juniors, 17-year-old kids starting to think about what they want to do with their career, and they're being influenced in so many different ways. Yeah. And so the cool thing about this too that I want to mention is we've had a business partner come along and sponsor this as a way to pour back into the community. Yeah. And what it's given for us is just this awesome idea of saying, hey, let's go do this in other cities. Let's go do this to wherever. Let's go. Yes. And so we're developing a really cool, powerful curriculum workshop type thing for leadership development. Whether it's high school kids, college kids, young adults, whatever, that can be taken into communities and poured into people, and then businesses can come along and sponsor that, support it. Help pour in. So, for our business audience, for our listeners or whatnot, I mean, if you have a group of people in mind, or if it sparks you in any way, I just want you to know this is what we do, and this is a tangible way that you can partner with us to help move this messaging forward, into our communities.
Right. Well, we'll let that sink in. You really think that through, and just let that sink in a little bit. It's pretty cool. I do want to come back at some point and so keep us on track here with time and mention the Life Center and what that's about. But so it's kind of a soup to nuts deal, and it's growing every week, every month, more and more, and we're excited and humbled, but very, very joyful. So anyway, we kind of wrapping up. This is our last segment, is it not?
No, we got two more. This one and one more.
Okay. I can't keep up with it.
You'll need
a young man. Look, you're a middle-aged dude. I must be old.
We all have our roles, Kevin. I'll keep us on track. Don't worry about that.
So, this idea that we've got some examples and stories, and people have all kind of things that happen in business where they struggle, with making decisions to difficult circumstances, even temptation and infidelity, and there's just all kind of stuff in the
It's everywhere.
Yeah, and so walking through that, yes, we help train people in how to do that in a very dynamic way that isn't preachy but powerful. But that said, one of the core ideas here is to go from discerning God's voice from a place of wisdom, your own experience, and through the Word, and then the implanted Word where He speaks to you, the mind of Christ. And you have everything. It's like Jesus comes in and makes those decisions for you, so you don't have to stress over it, so you can stay in a place of joy, even when things are very difficult. So that's sort of the context.
Yeah.
And then we can get into maybe these normal. They're different, but the principles that we teach, just kind of the core values of what it looks like to live out your faith in business.
Yeah, I think I want to take it one step further and just say, what we deal with so often, Kevin, is people who are on the back end of failed business decisions, failed marital decisions, failed personal development decisions, failed spiritual development decisions. We get the phone call all the time. With people who are struggling with these things that are a byproduct of not inviting the power of God into your life. It's not
Yeah.
getting past go. It's not
That's
not
right.
letting God become this conduit that helps you navigate,
Yeah.
all of your life. So you pile up on this stress at work. You pile up all this posturing, positioning, trying to do better behavior, check off the boxes, do the right thing. All that stress piles up
Right.
until it all explodes. And then people come and go, "Hell, I need help.
Yeah.
I need help."
They do.
And yes, they do. But what we're saying is, on the front of this, we want to be a voice of encouragement and a voice of joy and laughter,
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, let's do this to
Right.
avoid the pain down the road."
Right.
And so one of the key things is, like you said, learning to hear God's voice in your business, but also to learning to navigate other people
Yes.
and what they say about this. So let's tap into this a bit, because in business, somebody's always got an opinion about what you need to do, how
Yeah.
you should be doing something, and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. That's right. So we want to look for the signs of, when you're in a whether it's a lateral equal type position with someone, or they are a subordinate, or they are they have some authority within the business environment. It could be a customer. Customers seem to have some authority with us when we're trying to meet their needs in trade. So whatever the case, we want to understand how to deal with people from a place of spiritual fruit. So there are times where people will ask you to do things that you will, if you're not in line with this and not hearing from God and led by this, that you will compromise. And that's the worst thing you can do. Even though in the moment it might solve your problem, it's not going to win in the end. And, an example we use all the time is we've dealt with some different folks. Now, our partners and our sponsors are great folks. We stand behind them. But other folks we've had communication with in that arena will say things like, well, we don't want to work with you because it'll alienate our clients, because we talk about faith. Well, and they call themselves a faith-based company. And it's very, very defeating and deflating. It's almost like denying Jesus. And I'm going to go that far with it, because it's not good. So how do you deal with that? And then, but you see other businesses, and we love Chick-fil-A because they've done this so well, and they are the best fast food company in America, probably in the world, because they've honored God. But they didn't do it by preaching. There's not a scripture in the chicken sandwich. They're just doing a great job and in working from there. But you know who they are. Everybody knows this is a Christian-based company. So that right there speaks volumes. So how to go from this kind of weird, sort of up and down, hypocritical, double-minded way of doing business, calling yourself a Christian but not really acting like it, to just being dynamic and watching God bless it and everybody wins. Part of that is understanding people and the fruit you see around them. And you have to move away from things that aren't healthy. So those things are, let's talk about the negative side, or bad fruit, critical spirit. That's one thing. When someone's very critical, and there are times where you have to say, hey, stop. Mm-hmm. But someone lives in a mode of criticism. It's constantly critical. That's a red flag.
So this is something that's different than somebody kind of calling you out for something that you might have missed on. You're talking about somebody who lives in this kind of criticism, cynicism.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, a lot of times it's not criticism when you're being truth and it's coming from God and His Word. It all lines up. Hey, man, you're doing this. You need to stop. If that person has been given authority in your life, then you should listen to them like a father. But that's not critical spirit. A critical spirit is always putting weight on you, making you feel bad about yourself, and that's not good. So when you see that over and over again, and you don't feel light around the person, or lifted or encouraged, that's a red flag. Another one is people, they will mirror, they will call out things about themselves that are going on, but they'll put it on you. Some of the things, like you're manipulative, you're arrogant, you're a wolf in sheep's clothing, these are things that people have thrown at us in a variety of ways because we're bold in what we do. But the funny thing is it's they're really, what they're doing is they're telling on themselves, and we've seen it because it's got that weird narcissistic, not much fruit in it behavior, and where there's no vulnerability, no empathy, no humility. So we'll come back and talk more about it, but it's yucky.
Yeah, guys, we want to recognize one of our corporate partners. That is the Honeycutt Group, a family-owned insurance brokerage company with more than 10 years' experience here in the Wilmington area. Give Chad and his team a call for any insurance needs. 910-338-1773. Back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Faith in Business. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams, we're the co-founders of Uprint, the second hour of our show, dedicated to helping you live out faith between Sundays. We're all about bridging that gap and helping folks really just become excellent in what they do and living out their genius in the world. We have this organization, Uprint, which is our way of being able to produce content and resources for people to live this out. But we also have this beautiful nonprofit, which is the Life Center. And this is a vision for a facility that will invest in and develop people kind of for their heavenly purpose. And it's about helping people discover their genius, their gifting, and then living that out fully in the world, removing obstacles so that they can step into who they were created to be. That's the work of the Life Center. Those who partner with us, that's what they foster us being able to do. And we appreciate those who have an interest and those who are jumping in and diving in to help us transform the city that way.
Yeah, right on. So back to, and thanks for doing that. The Life Center is a nonprofit, it is a ministry, tax-deductible organization. So, just a reminder of that. So, we operate in these 5 basic ideas that we call the character of Jesus in business. And we use a little different terminology than the Beatitudes and similitudes and, meekness and all that. So what we're looking at here, we do that because as soon as you hear that in the business environment, people become offended over it and stop. They shut down and don't listen. So it's not bending the narrative. It's simply changing the terminology just enough, exact same meaning. It's like saying, King James versus, just using a wisdom, which you can use one of those two terms. You say King James and people are going to go, oh, right? You say wisdom, and what we back that up. Where does wisdom come from? It comes from God. So what we use is courage, integrity, vulnerability. These are the fun ones: vulnerability, empathy, and humility. And how many people in business environment want to go, oh no, those are awful? Right. I love it. This is Jesus. But in business, people just want to throw him to the curb. And it's like, that's smart. That's really intelligent. It's an intelligent way to fail. But you mentioned something last segment. Yes, we get people all the time coming to us in a mess. And I don't want to dwell on this, but we speak truth. We spend hours with them. We teach them things, and then they say, I'm in. And then, maybe something gets a little better or even gets a little worse, and then they don't want to engage. Now, here's the question. Why is that? What is the big thing they're afraid of? I'm not ready. What the heck does that even mean? I'm not ready. For real. Do you really believe? So this is over. It's way past time. It's way past go time. People have to kind of crap or get off the pot, so to speak. So I don't know if you have some thoughts about that.
That's you, man.
Yeah,
that's all you. I know that is just from years and years of lived out experience, seeing this happen, seeing it happen in your own life, and it's wanting people to just know the depth and goodness of walking with the Lord.
Well, they're wasting their life.
Yeah,
and they're going to keep wasting time, and I think that's where my heart is. This is not about patting somebody on the back. We do that when they need it, but
sure.
It's about saying, wake up. You're wasting your life, and you don't understand that God is good enough to fix your marriage. He is good enough. He will do it. Yeah. But if you don't really trust that, then you have to develop your faith. If you're not willing to spend time on that, then you're in trouble, and you're going to be 80-something years old and go, what did I do?
Yeah,
that's my biggest, that's where my heart beats for people.
That's what drives you. I mean, that's why Wake Up My Faith was, kind of the theme throughout your book, and that was the Twitter handle and your blog, and that's why the show is what it is. It's Wake Up Our Faith. It's just it's this cry in the wilderness to say, come on, guys, wake up,
get on with it, because it's so good, it's so good.
Yeah.
But we looked at earlier at the fruits of the Spirit, and you can do that, love and. I'll just read them off again. Carry this with you, and think about the opposite thing when you're discerning how to deal with people, and should you really listen to people. Now, again, this could be 5 shows. It's so much, but think about when there's love, joy, goodness, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Now, people can be off or have a bad day. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who constantly operate in these things. And so you might want to start listening to someone who's operating in these things because there's fruit there. But people who don't, when you start feeling the opposite or the counterfeit, we mentioned critical spirit and that type of thing, lack of humor or goodwill, always focused on what God isn't doing, anxiety, frustration, rush, harshness, contradictory behavior. And here's a big one. Inability to contain self, which self-control, the opposite of it. People that just bounce all over the place. This is one of the big ones, what the world would call narcissistic behavior. And so these three things add up to that. That's why we plugged them in as fruits, our own sort of businessy fruits. But when someone has no empathy, no vulnerability, they don't even know what it means. They don't know what it is. That's weird. And no humility. That's the road to psychopathic behavior. But back off a step, and it's narcissism. It is someone focused so completely on themselves that they have no way to see or feel what's going on with other people. Now, we've seen this, and we've seen it even in our own environment, not within our family, but it approaches us. So what do you do with that? In business, people know what that is. What do you do with that? So that's important. What I'm saying is we've got to learn how to recognize this and then recognize good fruit. That's the key in beginning to understand how to operate and make good decisions. People are going to tell you different stuff at different times. It's not about logic. It starts with, is there good fruit in this person's life, and is there bad fruit? And how you feel, from a spirit out, heart up, and then will. How does it all relate and connect? It's a lot. But
yeah, do you always have to do business with people like that, though? I mean, aren't there some type of business environments where you, just by nature, have to engage with folks that maybe don't share your sentiments? I mean, how do you begin to navigate through that? I'm not saying partner with them. I'm just saying, at what point in time do you wash your hands? And then at what point in time do you kind of invite someone in and say, yeah, you're a part of this thing?
Yeah, well, we're talking about two different things here. One's leadership. One, it's about whether you allow that person to have authority in your life or not. They may have a legal authority over you in your business or whatever. So that's where you get dilemmas. You don't want to give them spiritual authority over your life if they are not coming from God. But God wants us to honor these situations. So it gets kind of tricky. You have to do that through His wisdom, and you can't just logically figure it out, or you stay up all night. But yes, we need to always be open to people and dealing with people in terms of to start out with. But we don't want to give those people authority in our decision-making process and leadership in our life. We don't want that if it's not from God. It will take us astray. And it's just bad news. Mm-hmm. Like the guy who, I mentioned a couple of segments ago who was, stealing from my company. I hired him, blessed him, gave him a good job and paid him and all that, and he stole from me. What do you do with that? Well, what would Jesus do with that? That's what we're after here. So, yes, we have to deal with that, with element, with different people. But it's really about not allowing them to modify and change and distract and pull away our behavior. Enemy wants to derail us. So that's one way he does it. Could be someone who's very charismatic. But if you don't understand the fruits, and then again, these things, courage, integrity, vulnerability, empathy, and humility, you can be pulled off by the local Elvis.
Yeah.
And so you got to understand it from the ground up. Does that make sense?
No, it is. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's a great show today. We're kind of wrapping up here, and I need to recognize one of our corporate partners. Any final thoughts?
No, just we're going to talk more about it. So just step in, be encouraged.
Yeah. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We want to finalize and recognize, I should say, one of our corporate partners. That is Physical Therapy Services of Wilmington. This is ptservicesofwilmington.com. Southeastern North Carolina, serving the area since 1983. Make sure you give Russ and his team a call, family-owned and operated, 910-763-8286. Thanks for tuning in today to Faith in Business. We'll be back next week for more. See ya.